relationship between Donald Trump and the American media is complicated, both symbiotic and at times abusive. Trump's election strategy depended very heavily on the media. His winning formula: court controversy and get enough free coverage to drown his rivals out. And Trump was ratings gold for cable news channels like CNN and Fox News. He loved the unquestioning eye of the news cameras, but he never really liked those pesky reporters.
I find the press to be extremely dishonest. I find the political press to be unbelievably dishonest.
And in January this year, after CNN reported correctly, President Obama and Mr. Trump had both been briefed on a dossier containing unverified but potentially damaging allegations about Mr. Trump, the president-elect launched a blistering attack on CNN's Jim Acosta.
News organization.
Not
Can
you.
you give us a chance?
Your organization
You're attacking. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you give us a question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you stay categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Even CNN's arch-rival Fox News channel agreed that crossed a line, and they briefly closed ranks.
Though we at Fox News cannot confirm CNN's report, it is our observation that its correspondents followed journalistic standards and that neither they nor any other journalists should be subjected to belittling and delegitimizing by the President-elect of the United States.
And then came Crowdgate, the spat over how many people showed up in Washington to see Trump being sworn in. Nobody really thought that size was that important, just the question of who was telling the truth. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer used his first ever briefing to attack the media for their reporting.
Some members of the media were engaged in deliberately false reporting.
And when confronted with evidence showing Trump's crowd size was smaller than Obama's, spokeswoman Kellyanne Conway famously doubled down.
You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving, Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that.
And a phrase was born. Now we have alternative facts. And the president has made it very clear now how he views the news media. They are the opposition.
The dishonesty, the total deceit and deception makes them certainly partially the opposition.
So the battle lines are drawn, the most acrimonious relationship between a White House and the press since the days of Richard Nixon, and it seems to be getting worse by the day. We asked a group of political journalists, press secretaries and commentators for their perspectives. First, to Margaret Sullavan, the media columnist at the Washington Post. Do you sense, Margaret, that the president is trying to escalate this into a war? Is this a deliberate strategy?
Yes, I do think it's a deliberate strategy, but it's not a new one. It's something that we saw throughout the campaign. Donald Trump really used the news media as a foil. So he encouraged his crowds to say drop dead media, and he called journalists scum, and he said that we were the lowest form of humanity, and then later escalating that, I suppose, a little bit, the lowest form of life. So he has attempted, and I think successfully, to portray the media as an enemy.
Overall, Margaret, do you think that the media is doing a good job, or is it at risk of getting dragged into kind of petty arguments over crowd size and kind of, you know, the minutiae rather than the bigger picture?
Well, you know, it's always very hard to talk about the media because you know, are we talking about CNN or the National Enquirer or Breitbart or the New York Times? You know, so it's really tough to sort of paint with a broad brush. I think the best of the American media is doing a very good job right now. I'm heartened by the fact that the traditionally strong legacy news organizations, certainly the New York Times and the Washington Post, have been very successful in recent weeks in really getting underneath the surface and digging up some important news that matters to American citizens very much.
Also with us is Jay Nordlinger. He's the senior editor at the iconic conservative magazine, The National Review. Jay, welcome to the program. We've seen a pretty extraordinary escalation in the last day or two of Trump's war with the media. How do you think this is playing out right now?
It's hard to say because I think Trump's fans love it and other people don't. Trump is very popular with some, with many, when he attacks the media. And usually if you're on the right, you can't go wrong when you're attacking the media. But how does it play with the rest of the country? Not as well, for sure.
We've seen the president blame the media for forcing the resignation of Michael Flynn for being obsessed with alleged links between the Trump campaign and Russia last year, for trying to discredit his immigration ban. Are any of these raps that the president has on the press, in your opinion, warranted?
I suppose so. The press makes mistakes, but what do we mean when we say the press or the media? That's a lot of outlets. That's a lot of people. And the politicians like to paint the media with a broad brush, but it ain't necessarily so. One odd thing about Trump's claims concerning Flynn and the media is that Trump himself fired the man. He didn't have to. Flynn could be at his side today, or for the next 4 years, or whatever the duration of the Trump presidency will be. So the president has a certain talent. He's acting like some sort of bystander in the matter of Flynn, when the reason Flynn fell is that Trump, the president, fired him.
Finally, Jay, do you think the campaign of discrediting the media that Donald Trump has embarked upon is going to be a get-out-of-jail card for him if ultimately there is a smoking gun, some nefarious collusion between his campaign and the Russians last year, whatever it might be, that it will just get lost in the fire hose of news and it's not going to stick?
That is very well put. I couldn't improve on what you've just said. And bear this in mind, that here in America, I don't know about in your land, but here, we all watch different things and read different things. The left have their own media. We on the right have our own media. There's really quite a separation. I'm not sure there's much in common when it comes to the media. We used to have networks and major newspapers in common, and people like me cried against that because we thought it was semi-monopolistic. But the right watches Fox News and reads certain websites, and the left, they do other things. So the two sides really don't agree on facts, and when you don't, it's hard to begin airing of opinion.
Now, Moe Lee knows what it's like to face the press from the other side of the podium. He's a former spokesman for Hillary Clinton. Can I get a sense, Moe, your professional assessment, when you see Kellyanne Conway and Sean Spicer there speaking on behalf of the president, professional to professional, what do you think's going on there? How do you think they're doing?
I think the entire administration, speaking specifically from a communication strategy, is off to an incredibly rough start. And I think that's probably a generous way of putting it. And there's a number of reasons. First and foremost is this appears to be an administration that is completely devoid of fact. Either it doesn't know fact from fiction or it doesn't care about fact from fiction. And it started that way from the very first brouhaha over the crowd size at his inauguration. The most trivial of things that an administration could possibly focus on in its first 24 hours. Yet the administration and all of its surrogates were sent out to push back on media narratives and essentially deliver a falsehood. And it just sent a strong message from the beginning that if they are going to engage on something so trivial and so demonstrably false, then it should raise very serious concerns about their ability to tell the truth. And that has happened consistently on things far more important.
Moe, as a strategy, do you think, though, it's working, the delegitimizing of the media by the Trump administration? Is it serving their purpose as well?
Donald Trump's approval rating has plummeted. He came into office as the least popular president-elect in American history in terms of his approval rating, and it has gotten worse. It is far worse than any president in the history of polling at this point in their presidency. And I think the constant back and forth, the constant fights over trivial matters, and the constant delegitimizing not just of the press but of other major institutions has taken a toll on him. Having said that, there is a portion of the population that will stand by Donald Trump come hell or high water.
Moe, do you give credence to President Trump's claim that the media is unfair to him and to his administration? There is research out there that shows that when it comes to the party political affiliation of journalists, there's a wide range, but there is a tendency towards the liberal end of the spectrum. So there is some evidence to suggest that, that maybe some sections of the press do have it in for him.
I have never seen a campaign of either party that has not felt like it was being treated unfairly by the press. I have never seen a White House of either party that has felt like it wasn't being treated unfairly by the press. That is normal. And I think most reporters try to do a good job of holding either side accountable, and sometimes they get it right and sometimes they get it wrong, but I've never known a press secretary who hasn't felt like they are under siege and that the press is chasing the wrong story. That is normal. But I don't know that I would say that this one is being treated any more fairly or unfairly than any other. I do think this White House is giving more ammunition than anybody else has. It is, again, I've never seen a White House lie this often since Richard Nixon's. And even then, he wasn't getting caught in the lies until much later in his presidency. This one is doing it out of the box.
Also with us is Carlos Meza from the news website Vox. He's also the LGBT director at the progressive media watchdog organisation Media Matters. Carlos, President Trump has been accused of trying to delegitimise the news media, but isn't the news media trying to do exactly the same thing, delegitimise Trump and his administration, looking for the big scandal that's maybe going to bring him down?
Well, I think it's the job of a free press, and certainly the reason that in America we have such respect for a free press is that there's this belief that the press is meant to hold people in power accountable and speak truth to power. These scandals that you see in the news are not scandals for the sake of scandals. They're scandals because they deal with central questions of legitimacy of the most powerful office in the country. And for all that Trump decries news media as being partisan or fake or biased against him, what you're seeing from major news outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post is really strong, really deeply sourced journalism. It is true that many of the big stories coming out of the Trump administration over the past few weeks have been negative. That is not the result of the media having blinders on or the media being biased. That's a result of an incredibly messy, bumpy, and in a lot of cases disorganized and unprofessional White House transition. It is the job of a free press to note when things are going wrong.
So, Carlos, would you say that the media is learning a lesson from Trump, that they maybe should have been more questioning, more sceptical of the previous administration, Barack Obama?
I think skepticism is healthy for any journalist. And I think recognizing and remembering that journalism can work even when you have a non-cooperative White House is a really important lesson to learn. It's a bummer that that lesson is being taught through an extremely non-transparent White House. It's a bummer that it's being done with certain journalists being targeted. But I think you're seeing a remembering on the part of a lot of news networks that this is our job, and we're not here to be liked, and it's not the role of journalists to be liked. It's the role of journalists to tell the truth and find the truth and to let the public know what the government is doing. And I think that Trump, for all his flaws, acts as a very useful foil to remind these journalists that that is their primary responsibility and that that's a very successful business model in a lot of cases.
Well, Carlos, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.